So, Don,
Yes.
just so you guys would know, Don is the director for X1023 with Hubbard Radio. And I've been doing Sunday morning talks with Don probably 4, 5, 6 times a year or more on Sunday morning. And we talk about various topics and different aspects of what's going on in the community. And Don called me and said, can we talk about what's happening from a perspective of Minneapolis, what's going on with all the different things that are happening in this country. And I said, why not? And then I thought about it. I said, I got 4 black police chiefs here with 4 of the largest cities in the county. Let's invite them to the table and see. And I'm going to get Chief Sims. I saw he was on TV last night. Chief Osgood couldn't make it today, but they're going to join us again. And I want to do another version of this. But Don sent out questions last night to you. And I'm really thankful that all of you agreed to join us to have a discussion. I'm going to tell you up front right now, Don, I have a hard stop at 11:30, and I know Chief Adderley does too, and I'm quite sure Chief Gregory does too. So I'm not going to go any further than what we're doing. I'm going to let you take it from here, but thank you guys, and we will just have a round discussion and talk. Thank you all.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good, thank you very much.
All right, so listen, I respect your time, totally understand. So I'm going to get right into this. First of all, before I start, let me just say I appreciate everything that you all do. Thank you for your service. This is not an attack on a police department, but obviously there are some serious questions and concerns in the community. And obviously we know what's going on right now. And the case, and we've been seeing this on the news. On Monday, police in Minneapolis were called because someone was passing a counterfeit $20 bill, and it ended up with George Floyd losing his life, and it didn't happen. And right now, I don't even know where we even start with the conversation. So when it comes to us as Black people, and me talking to a lot of people in the community, they are afraid when it comes to cops. There's some trust there that's broken. And I guess we together need to figure out, how do we fix this? What is it that you all are going through as far as from the cop side? How do we fix this problem? Where do we even start? I guess that's the first question.
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think that it's open dialogue. People have to have discussions. People need to express what their feelings are, their perceptions. And, you know, sometimes I believe when you have those type of discussions, it's based on a lot of misinformation where people feel certain things have happened and it really didn't. And you keep people informed on what the true information is and what can be done and what can't be done legally. I think that's headed in the right direction. You know, we talk here about Minnesota, and I mean, I haven't seen the news recently, but I'm understanding that there's a big riot there and people are rioting in the city. Hopefully, come election day, they're going to be rioting at the voting booths and not rioting, but the same efforts going there and making sure that their voices are being heard, because that's really where the fight is. It ain't, and I don't want to go and riot at this, because I know a lot of people get hung up on my words here, but no, not riot, but just make sure you go and vote, because that's where you're going to make the changes. They ain't going to make the change burn down Target. I can tell you that right now.
If I can chime in on that one just a little bit as well. I think I agree wholeheartedly with the comments of Chief Adderley with regard to it takes a dialogue and conversation. And this didn't start, unfortunately, with the death of George Floyd. It goes way back. And I think that's what people are commenting on, that it's not just the one incident. The one incident is bad enough. It's horrific. However, what we see now with these protests and riots is because there's a lot of pent up frustration and pent up anger between the community and law enforcement. And I don't know that that's much different in a lot of communities around the country right now. There's a lot of pent up frustration and pent up communities, pent up anger in communities of color across the country. And we have some anxiety and frustration even in Palm Beach County communities. So in Boynton Beach, I've made it important to try to continue dialogue. And as the new chief here, just coming up with my 2nd year anniversary, I want to relay to my community members that I'm here to listen, and I'm here. I can't change what happened in the past. I can't undo and right all the wrongs that may have occurred historically, but I can promise going forward, every such incident will be reviewed thoroughly. We have looked at our use of force policies. We've looked at our training. We're making changes as we go through all the evolutions of current incidents that happen and how our policies address those incidents, and where we need to make changes. We're open to making those changes and trying to have that conversation with our community members and exchange those ideas of what they see happening versus what we're doing, I think goes a long way towards trying to prevent something like this in the future.
Now, what is the policy when you have someone under arrest, so the public can know as well? Like, is it policy for an officer to have his knee in someone's neck? We don't know.
Well, for Boynton Beach, we don't teach officers to put their knees in people's neck and hold it there and sit on someone's neck for minutes and minutes and minutes and minutes. In general terms, without getting into the legal discussions, obviously the officers are within their rights and within the law to take someone into custody and deprive them of their freedom at that moment. And they're allowed to use reasonable force to accomplish taking someone into custody and presenting them before the judge or magistrate to hear the probable cause against them. So as someone resists, that force can become greater. But at no point should obviously you don't go from someone who was selling cigarettes or stole something out of a store to lethal force. That doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen. And that's not what we train our officers to do. So they have a large range of force options available to them, but they have to be reasonable against what the offender is doing or what the crime is that has been committed.
So what is a person supposed to do if they're in a situation where they're on the ground or they're under arrest and they're in a position where they can't breathe? If you are, a pedestrian on the sidewalk, like, is there anything a person can do to help them without potentially losing their life?
Well, I applaud those people who were in Minneapolis and were witnesses to what happened there, making sure they expressed themselves. They told the officers what they perceived the person couldn't breathe or what they heard the person saying. They reiterated that, they recorded that, they live streamed that in an effort to try to get attention on this. I don't encourage people to go in hand-to-hand fighting with the police. That doesn't usually end up well. And it doesn't matter the circumstance it is, whether it's a traffic stop or whether it's someone who's being arrested for trespass. It's not a good idea to try to fight on the street. The fight should happen legally in a courtroom. That's the criminal justice process that we have. You and I can't make a new one. As Chief Adderley mentioned earlier, it does take people in Congress, people in our state legislatures, people on our city councils that write the laws. We don't create them. We just have to enforce them. So the law says that we take the person in custody on the street, and then a magistrate or judge decides whether to let that person go or keep them held over without a bond or something like that. But you do need to comply with the officer on the street.
Don, one of the things that have crossed my mind is that, and Chief Adderley, this would be something new for you to know. In 2015, I led, along with the late Judge Ed Rogers, the last big march that happened in downtown West Palm Beach, with the help of the city, the commissioners, the police department, and we marched under the same thing in 2015. and we held signs with "Can't breathe, I can't breathe." And I had a lot of community leaders, and we actually did the march in downtown West Palm Beach. And I feel like I'm right back to where I was right there 4 years ago with the same endeavor, with the same action. What can we tell? I know we talk about communication, but what can I tell that mother right now that has young Black males to say, it's gonna be all right? You know, it's gonna be all right. We gonna get past this. But it's hard to say when I'm saying the same thing year after year after year.
Saying that everything's going to, well, I think that we need to educate our youth. I mean, I do believe that no perception is a true reality. And there's a lot of people, I mean, let's be honest about it. There's a lot of people that don't trust the police. I mean, specifically when you're in our Black communities. You know, we got a very big problem, I think, here in West Palm Beach when we have, you know, 60 plus unsolved homicides.
Mm-hmm.
And you actually look at them, you got groups of 10 to 15 people that stood around and watched someone get murdered. Everyone knows who shot the person. And then when the police show up, no one wants to cooperate.
Right.
And we're basically saying this is some group that's basically okay. It's okay to kill each other. It's okay that we, you know, let this person that have been responsible for all these homicides go. I mean, we got a situation where we got about 5 or 6 people that are responsible for almost 60 homicides. And that's basically when you speak to people who live in the community,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
65 people have been murdered, and these individuals murdered them, and everyone stood around and watched them do it. So, and then when law enforcement come in, they don't trust them to talk to them. And, you know, I hear the stories. I mean, you know, in the past,
Mm-hmm.
you know, someone came forward and says, yeah, you know, I think it's wrong. This guy murdered that guy, and I'm a witness. And then the next thing you know, is retaliation against that person, and then looking to law enforcement to say, what are you going to do for me now?
Right.
You know, to me, you know, I my roots is in Fort Lauderdale. That my parents came to this country in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And my father was a Bahamian national who then later got his citizenship here in the United States. And, you know, he came to this country searching for the American dream, and he found it. But let me tell you something, man. We lived in the most violent neighborhood in the city of Fort Lauderdale, and he wasn't concerned about retaliation. No drug dealers hung out in front of George Adderley's house and sold drugs. Prostitutes weren't allowed to hang out there. And, you know, everybody in our neighborhood was being burglarized, but they didn't want to deal with my father because they knew he was going to stand up to him. He wasn't going to be bullied by them.
Right.
I mean, we got people here, man, that being bullied by the people in the community, and you know, we're not even talking about the police coming in. Take the police completely out of the equation. They can't even live comfortably in their neighborhood, in their house. They're afraid to come outside because the bullies in the street have taken their freedom away from them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So the trust factor goes a little bit deeper than, you know, we don't trust the police. They don't trust the police to come in and properly police them, that's for sure, because they will cooperate. And then they're not really trusting of this community that have built so much tension and violence within it.
I agree.
I
agree.
totally, okay, I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, and then, you know, you say to your kids, you know, I mean, it all depends on where your kids dress their head at night. I mean, you got some African-American families, they're afraid to come over to Tamarind or some of these other neighborhoods, that the high crime neighborhoods in our city. And they want to keep their kids completely away from that. You know, they fear that, you know, this is a rough neighborhood, and they basically fear being there. And then if you have a kid that grew up there, they got to learn the hard way, man. I mean, it's a hard life, especially when, you know, you got the big bully down the street that's going to determine if you're going to go outside and play tonight. So,
Right.
I mean, what do you say to your kids about not just how they interact with the police, how they're going to interact with the people in general, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very great point. You know, I asked this question on my social media, and Steve Harvey talked about it as well. And you're absolutely right. That's something that needs to be addressed in our communities, and it's something that needs to be fixed, because if we're not going to step up and identify these people, then there's not going to be change on that end. However, when I asked that question, the point was also brought up that, you know, there's this no snitching code, it appears to be, in the police department as well. And it's a lot of good cops. It's a lot of good cops in the police force, but those few bad cops, you know, obviously one bad apple could spoil a bunch, but you hear of times where no one is stepping up to know that something is wrong. And we hear about this unspoken code in police force. And again, I'm just being honest here, because these are the questions, and hopefully you all can shed some light on this. But even in the video that we saw in Minneapolis, the other police officer didn't even help in the situation, and he saw a guy and it was dying. And thankfully, there was somebody recording. But if that videotape wasn't there, who knows what could have happened after that. So my thing is not to really do on the spot with this, but I think there's a trust factor that's broken as well, because it's like, hey, if people feel like the same thing that goes on in the community happens in the police department, then why are they going to snitch to the police if they're doing the same thing, if that makes any sense?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And let me just tell you, you know, I'm pretty sure if you look at some of these other professions, you know, you have accountants that don't police their other fellow accountants. And when they're lying and stealing people money, I mean, they ain't calling up their peer board and say, oh, go check out this guy because he's a crook. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't know. I mean, it's maybe that. But let me just tell you this, man. I can't speak for the other officers, but for the almost 40 years, I've been an officer since 1980, and it's almost 40 years for me. I am not going to stand back and look at something that's wrong. I took my oath serious. I'm going to come forward, and if I got anybody that worked within my command, I'm going to hold them accountable. And if they don't do the job and they don't uphold their oath, I am going to deal with them. I'm not going to have a blind eye. I'm going to be 100% transparent to the public, and they will see exactly what it is. I mean, you know, when you talk about this incident in Minnesota, I mean, you know, there's a court ruling, Graham Connor, that tells you the level of force. And everybody training, I'm pretty sure every training throughout the country, if you got a police chief that is, you know, in tune to best practices throughout this country, their use of force policy is based on Graham Connor. And it's just the three basic parts of it. You know, the severity of the charge, this person's level of resistance, and the third is their ability to escape, okay? And once you get past those three areas and the person is completely under control, the job is to handcuff them and put them away. But one of the things that I do believe that we need to be aware of is the fact that, you know, these officers on video don't look good. It doesn't look good. And I mean, but, you know, and you know, you know, people here probably saw the other part of the video, but I haven't seen the part that led to where they got him on the ground. I don't know what happened prior to that. Maybe somebody else know. But you know what kind of got me last night, I was listening to the interview of the mayor of the city, and he basically said that he doesn't have all of the facts of the case. He doesn't want to talk about the facts of the case. He just want to fire these people. You know what I mean? And where I think we all need to come together and have a clear understanding as, you know, although it looks bad, you know, everyone that's accused of anything in America, in the United States of America, they get due process, and they definitely get their chance in court or arbitration or whatever the case may be. And sometimes when you jump to conclusions and you put the cart before the horse, you don't prevail at the end. That's why you get a lot of things. I mean, a lot of these decisions are being made very quickly, and they don't give these officers their due process. And that's when the unions come in and they win the battles in court and in arbitrations. And we end up having to write a big check to this person who killed this guy, and he's back on the force, and we can't get rid of him. You know? So, I mean, I understand, you know, everybody's very anxious, and we need to put the guy in handcuffs, and you know, the mayor last night, and you know, and I heard his speech, and I feel his passion and his drive to do what is right for all the right reasons. But sometimes, you know, when you get wrapped up in that, you lose sight of, well, you know, this is a system that allows these people due process, and you know, you got to make sure you got making some informed decisions when you make those big decisions like what they've done. I mean, they just came out and fired these people, and according to the mayor, he doesn't even know what the evidence is against them, other than a videotape.
Mm-hmm. Chief, how do we go back and take that message that you first stated earlier in this little segment just now, when you said you took the oath and you're going to do your best to not overlook anything? How do we take that snippet right there and bring it back and put it out to the public so people in the community says, Chief Adderley is adamant about this? You know, how do we bring that message and put it out there front and center?
Well, I mean, I say this when every time I have a discussion with people about, you know, I came in here. I've been here almost a year. Next week's going to be a year for me, and Chief Gregory's been in his position here 2 years now, right, Mike?
Yep, 1, 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2 years. So, you know, Chief Gregory and I come from a whole different environment, and you know, it's a little different up here. Some of the things that I've seen and some of the discussions I had with Chief Gregory, but and it's not in a bad thing; it's in a good thing. And I think that the more we get to interact with the people with a negative perception, and we get to have these discussions. You know, I when I first came up, you know, I wanted to familiarize myself with the violent neighborhoods in the city of West Palm Beach. So I would go for walks in the morning, and you know, the same people that were hanging out selling drugs at night were the same people hanging out selling drugs in the morning, about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. A little different type of event, because, you know, I had an opportunity to actually talk to them and see what their thoughts were. I mean, these are people that have been selling drugs in this city for a long, long time. And they're not the big money people. I mean, they're the people that, you know, the workers on the street.
Right,
and
the street guys.
They get right. But let me tell you something. There is no doubt in my mind, there's some people above them that have been sitting on this distribution in these areas for a long time, and they've made millions of dollars on it. Yes. You know, and you know, I think that some of the things that we're doing now with our federal partners and the Sheriff Bradshaw has been nothing but 100% supportive of our efforts and helping us and address some of our violent crime issues here in our city. Every time we call him, he's only did nothing but say yes and help us out with whatever our needs were. Mm-hmm. But I think that type of partnerships with law enforcement locally, and Chief Osgood and I were having dinner last night, and we're talking about the same things that's going on in our city. It's the same thing that he's facing. It's the same people, Riviera Beach, West Palm Beach, and it's all the same group of people that's terrorizing both cities.
Yes.
So we now have to work together. But when you get to how do we build the trust, I think you got the majority of the people are just like myself who say, we're here to do our job. We're not here to mistreat people. We're really here to do our job. And I believe if you want to talk about who is the racist officer, it ain't the one that's saying put me in the black community so I can go over and beat up the black people, because that person realized he or she has to put their life on the line to protect them. They got no other choice. Maybe the one that said, I never want to work over there and I never want to talk with them and all of that. Now, that's the person that kind of stand out for me as being the racist cop. But the person that says, I'm willing to go and work in this black neighborhood and put my life on the line to make sure that they're safe at night, I don't know. I don't get the impression that that's the person that stands out when you talk about who's the racist officer and who's not.
I think I'll just jump in real quick. I think there's going back to the point that was made at the beginning here, that there's a real opportunity right now. It's come out of a tragedy that we are looking at in Minneapolis, but unfortunately, we seem to only get together when there's a crisis, or we get people's attention and people get involved when there's a crisis. I wish we had this kind of interest and we're having more of these conversations prior to the crisis, prior to things going down the drain, down the tubes, but prior to the place being burned to a crisp up in Minneapolis, the precinct being burned down. We need to have these conversations regularly, and right now there's a unique opportunity that was highlighted on in the beginning here also, that you've got new chiefs in West Palm Beach, you got a new chief in Riviera Beach, you got a new chief in Boynton Beach, and we're looking at a new chief in Delray. I'm sorry for good friend Javaro.
Yeah, Chief Sims.
Yeah, we've got new chiefs in these places. We're looking at these policies. We're looking at how we're training. We're looking to put our stamp and our manner of policing on these agencies, which may in some cases be different than they were in the past. And this is the real opportunity for each of these neighborhoods, each of these cities, and the people who have concerns with policing to get with these new chiefs now and have this conversation, have this dialogue, share the history, of course, but understand we can't change the past. We can only try to put processes and training and philosophies in place today to take us forward, to make a difference so that we can avert and not have something like what's happened in Minneapolis happen again, or the history of Boynton, the history of these different cities happening again in the future. But now is the time while the iron's hot, while the conversation's out there, while there's interest, because before this happened, the whole first year I was here, I was trying to reach out to community members, putting messages on social media. I've attended a number of groups. There wasn't always a big turnout. I've been to groups and there's only 10 people there. One or two groups I went to, and there was more cops than there were people from the community at the meeting. Right. Getting people to come out and be engaged when there's not a crisis is a part of the challenge with what we talked about, not just people in the community not talking about crime, but getting people to come out and talk about anything. So as we can take advantage of this tragedy and try to get together between the police departments and their communities that are experiencing these issues and work through the challenges, understanding what we have to do procedurally to make sure that whatever action is taken against the officer, it sticks and doesn't get overturned and the person get hired back immediately, like Chief Adderley highlighted earlier. Those are the things that we need to be having conversations about now. So they understand why someone doesn't get arrested and charged in Florida the day after something happened. There's a reason for that, and people need to understand it so we all are following the law, but also because that's too late. When the incident happens, it's too late to kind of go back and undo things. We can only go forward, and now is the time to do that.
Don, I have a question, because Chiefs, how do we look at officers that may have a long record of disciplinary actions that have been taken against them over a long period of time? How does that play into the role that they stay active on the streets? because the officer that was involved with this in Minneapolis had 12 to 18. I don't know what the right number is, but he had double-digit disciplinary actions against him over his tenure. And how do you, as a leader, review your team to make sure that those individuals may not have a job going forward?
It's a big question. You raise a good issue because it's not a simple one. If it was simple, it'd probably been solved long ago. And
Mm-hmm.
the challenge there is that I haven't seen that officer's record or what those incidents were, but as you just heard, Chief Adderley had a 40-year career in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for 33 years. Over the longer you're involved, and depending on what level you're at, obviously in the chief and assistant chief and the higher command roles, you get less complaints. But for an officer who's been on the road in patrol or as a detective for 20 or 30 years, you can imagine there's going to be some disciplinary actions, whether they're car accidents or they're complaints of discourtesy or whatever in someone's file. So a certain amount of it is the context of
Right.
what is in the file and how long did it take them to accumulate that record. And then it comes down to how bad was any one of those incidents? Were any of those incidents in and of themselves enough to say this is an incident that warrants this person's termination from employment? Because as soon as you fire someone, they very rarely
Retaliation.
walk away in the night. The first thing is to the union, and the next thing is to an attorney, and this is going to be litigated.
Mhm.
So every chief takes that termination decision very, very seriously. How likely are we to succeed in not just firing them today, but keeping them fired after we fire them? Because if we go to that route, there's going to be challenges legally. So you have to look at the entirety of the file, the context of the complaints against the person. If they got 12 or 15 use of force complaints that are sustained, well, then certainly there's some call for action that needs to be applied to this person. If they can't be retrained, if they can't be counseled back into following policy, then you have to look at accumulation of a performance plan results with them being terminated.
Okay. Yeah.
You talked about.
Can I just add something to this? Because where I kind of think our battles, when I say our battles, I think that the people who really want to see a change there, when it comes down to the process, let's have the march, let's have a protest, let's do this. They need to take that to the state legislations, because that's where the police unions are. That's where they're lobbying in Tallahassee, and they get pretty good support from the legislator. So, when you take a look at the Police Bill of Rights, I mean, there's no way a situation here like we'll be able to immediately just fire this guy. We have to do some type of investigation. I mean, the state attorney, we have to rely on them. I mean, this is a criminal case as far as I'm concerned, and, a battery. I mean, how long is it going to take before the state attorney decide that they're going to file criminal charges? I mean, that's a call for the state attorney's office. So there's a lot of moving parts there, and some contractual, there's some contractual standards where, you can't take away someone's pay unless they got, formal charges by the state attorney's office. And that is built out in some of these collective bargaining contracts. So, I think the interesting thing about Minnesota is they fired a guy immediately, and the other people that were there, and they still have a riot, right?
Yes.
Isn't
Yes.
it a riot in Minnesota?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know what? Let me just share this with you. And I think when you talk about race relations and police community relations, it's a very complicated subject. It is very complicated. And I wanted to just share this story with you because this kind of gives you an idea as to where we are today and how come this thing is so confusing. We in Fort Lauderdale, Mike was an assistant chief. I was the chief of police when we fired 4 racist officers in the Fort Lauderdale Police Department. Clear when you listen to things that they said and their action and how they interacted with the public, and they made it perfectly clear they had an issue of race, and they completely demonstrated that, and our IA investigation showed it, and we terminated them. Okay, we terminated them from employment, and and when we came out with the termination, we went to the communities throughout the city, and we educated the people, totally transparent. We gave our investigation. We made national news. A lot of things happened as a result of this case, and a lot of people were looking at the Fort Lauderdale Police Department as to how we're going to handle, not only how we handled this incident, but how we're going to respond to it. And I remember on a Thursday night, and we were at this town hall meeting in a predominantly black neighborhood in the city, and it was like, I am the bad guy. I'm being attacked. And it was, short of, we should give a vote of no confidence in the police chief who fired these people, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then during that discussion, it's the mayor of Fort Lauderdale at the time, Jack Seidler, our city manager, Lee Feldman, and the commissioner of the district that was with us. And we had a discussion because a lot of people felt that we weren't properly training our officers on human diversity. And they thought that there was room for improvement. So we offered an opportunity for the NAACP to be a part of our training program. And we had the city manager there who knew exactly what the budget cost would be, and he put a very big number on the table, and they wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. But we walked away that Thursday night. It was not a pleasant feeling. It was one of, I don't believe we made this group happy. Okay? Fast forward, Saturday afternoon, myself, the mayor, and the district commissioner in that district, we attend a event at the Fort Lauderdale Yacht Club. And it's an event for all of the homeowners associations in the Las Olas area, which is a very wealthy area town. And to put you in the right perspective, I walked into a room of about 600 to 700 people, and I was the only black person there. Well, maybe the people that were serving food were black too, but I'm the only black person there. The president of the of the group introduced me because I'm the first speaker. She says, "This is our police chief, Frank Adderley, who just made national news for terminating 4 racist Fort Lauderdale police officers," and the whole room stood and gave me a standing ovation. And the mayor looked at me and says, "I can't believe this. Mm-hmm. We're in the black community. We fire 4 racist white officers, and we're being told that we're not doing our job and we're failing. And we go to this predominantly white neighborhood, and they give us a standing ovation." I mean, I was just shocked by that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't know, man. So when you start talking about this community relations deal, it is a very, very complicated subject. And I mean, the only way I can say, and when we go back to your first question here, how do we make it better? We definitely need to all sit in a room and have more discussions and let everybody kind of speak what their piece is, because perception is a true reality. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of people with some very different perspectives from a large range. And until we all can get together and talk about it, I don't think we're going to ever be able to solve it.
Well, listen, the radio station is here to help. amplify the message and get it out. I am definitely glad that we're having this conversation. I wanted to ask a couple of quick questions because I know we have to wrap it up in just a few minutes. Do we have enough cops living in our communities that they actually patrol?
I'll jump in and say, just first off, I don't think there ever is. That's a very difficult one to solve, but I would certainly like to see more officers who live in the city.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that number is very high, but I don't even know the reason as to why. I mean, I'm a year here in West Palm. I don't see me living in the other city other than the place that I work. I kind of like living in the most violent neighborhood. That's what I did in Lauderdale, and that actually turned out to be a good fit for me personally and professionally, I would think. But I don't know what the answer to that is. I kind of get the impression that a lot of people want to just get away and, you know, de-stress themselves. You know, you go to call and you see a lot of violence in the street, and you know, you want to be able to get away and from that to kind of rejuvenate yourself before you go back. I get it. You know, sort of like this church down in Lauderdale where they got the pastor normally lived next to the church, but you know, every day, you know, you got one of his church members knocking on the door. They got questions for him, so he didn't feel that he need to continue to have his life disrupted. So he moved away into another city, away from the church, so he can have some peace and quiet, and when he get away from doing his church duties. So I don't know, maybe that's the same concept. Do I think it's a benefit to have police living in the same neighborhoods that they patrol? Absolutely, because when people come in and they have concerns about what's going on in their neighborhood, you can definitely relate to those concerns, and you have a much better chance of solving those problems because you know them, you live it, and you understand them.
Absolutely, I agree with him right there. Just add on just a little piece to that. All that Chief Adderley said is right on the money, but people often kind of forget that when an officer gets off duty, they have the rest of their personal life to deal with, and in many cases, they have families. So what's important to an average person in the community's perspective for their family is important to police officers and their families. So what does that include? Okay, where are the best school districts or school zones for my kids to go to school? Well, officers want their kids to they want to live in those districts and school zones where they have the best schools as well. They have officers who, looking at when they first start, they don't make a lot. So if you have a community that has a high level of pricing for residential homes, they're going to move someplace where they can find what they can afford. So there's a lot of other factors other than the job that come into that conversation of where do I move my family and where do I plant my life. Maybe they want to be close to their mom or their parents who have healthcare issues, so they can be an advocate to help them with those issues. There's a lot of other things that play into it on a personal level that makes it a very complex decision.
You talk with your officers all the time. What are their concerns as it relates to the community?
What kind of concerns do you mean?
I mean, well, obviously, to Blacks, we feel like, hey, if we get pulled over by a cop, it may not end well. Or obviously, when it comes to cops, a lot of times we're scared when a police officer approaches us. But are your officers concerned about certain things, or do they ever say, hey, this could help out the situation if, you know, people did this instead of doing something else?
100%. Yeah, I think there's a lot of conversation like that. And I think part of it is that, first of all, the officers are going to look at it from the perspective that they're at work and they're doing their job. And the first thing that they think about is safety. We teach them to think about safety. What's safe for them, and then what's safe for the person they're interacting with, and how to control this interaction so it's safe for both parties. So we know from our training and the statistics that are out there that traffic stops are some of the most dangerous interactions officers have with the public. Because you don't know, you think you're stopping someone because they ran a red light or went through a stop sign or something, but in reality, they're running away from a robbery or they ran away from a domestic violence incident and they don't want to get caught. So you think you're stopping them to give a ticket and they think you know that they robbed someone. So there's a high level of safety that the officer puts into place on those interactions. The same thing applies to other interactions where an officer is responding to a domestic violence situation. That's also a call that has a high number of incidents of injury for officers when they go to domestic violence calls. So the public, I don't know that they necessarily take all that into account because they're dealing with a personal situation for them. They ran a stop sign, they call the police because of a noise complaint or whatever, but the police are thinking from a completely different perspective of what is unsafe here? How can I make sure that no one ambushes me? How can I make sure that this person I'm stopping doesn't have a gun, is going to shoot me? So there's a whole different set of factors that go into play that the officer is thinking separately from how the person who's being contacted is thinking.
Could some of these officers be mentally fatigued because they're seeing these same type of things happen all the time and maybe need like a change or something? I'm just trying to come up with some solutions over here to help fix the problem. Could that be part of the problem as well?
Mental wellness is clearly an issue in law enforcement right now. We're seeing way too many officers committing suicide, way too many divorces, way too many instances of substance abuse nationally. Those trends are out there. Those statistics are readily available. So you have to say that stress plays a factor into police officers' mindsets. Not everyone is the same, and it's different for every individual. So you can't say that they all have it, or that none of them have it. But just like the population have those issues, so does the population of police officers.
My last question over here, because I don't want us to just talk about this and then get off the phone. What is our next step? I know you're talking about meeting and talking about this, but let's come up with a plan of action real quickly so I can let the audience know what should we do next. Sorry about that. Someone just called. What's the next step so that we could at least attempt to fix this problem and continue to people are calling and continue to bridge the gap between our communities as well as law enforcement?
I'll just say continue these types of conversations. So far in the last week, I've had 3 to 4 different invitations from groups to speak to them in light of what's happening in Minneapolis, and I've accepted those conversations, and I'm talking to different groups about that now. So continuing the dialogue, continuing the opportunities to talk on radio in the community settings when we can start meeting again. Until then, we can continue to these video conferencing and Zoom activities. And like I said earlier, now is the time to strike with this conversation and this discussion and putting things in place to keep us together and on the same page going forward, and not let everybody recede back into their respective corners and we don't talk anymore. Chief Adderley, what do you think?
I personally want to thank you all for taking. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I agree. I just think the more opportunities we get to have these type of conversations, the better, and that's why we can move forward. I think the more informed people are, I think the less tension that you have. And, you know, I think a lot of what I've seen is a lot of incidents that get blown completely out of proportions because of misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Listen,
Don, I first of all, I just want to say thank you to Chief Gregory and to Chief Adderley. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. We will have more conversations like this. And Don, I think it'd be up to you and I to try to figure out the different format or how we could present this to more community residents, let them get engaged, let them ask questions and get a dialogue going back and forth in this type of format until we can meet together, okay? And I'll be more than happy when the day comes that we can join in a room together. I will be the first to say, guys, come and join me here. We're going to be at this location in Boynton Beach. We're going to be at this location in West Palm Beach. We're going to be in Chief Osgood's Riviera Beach. We're going to be in Chief Sims Delray Beach. We will find those formats. And like I said in my message to you earlier, let's get together while we have time. And Chief Gregory, I agree with you, while we're not battling an issue locally. Let's get together now and have those discussions. So thank you guys very much for giving us your time. Thank you so much.
I want to say
Okay,
thank
buddy.
you. This has been an awesome interview. I do appreciate your transparency and all that you do. And we appreciate everything the cops do here with us at the radio station, Hubbard Radio. Like, I see what you all are doing in the community. The good cops all the time. We have great partnerships with you all, and we want to continue to help you all with that and to also bridge that gap between law enforcement and the community. So thank you very much for taking the time so that we can address this. Thank you for taking the time to address this, because obviously the community is hurting, and the cops, you all are hurting as well, you know? So this is a loss on both sides, and we want to do everything that we can to fix this. So again, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to share some information with us so that I can share back with the community. And remember, you always have the radio waves here to get the message out so that the audience can know what's going on. So feel free to contact me anytime. And thank you, Patrick, for setting this up.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you.